Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Commander Pod, your Magic the Gathering podcast for all things Commander. I'm Keltson, and I am flying solo this week. I'm going to be sharing my experience with Celes as a Commander and some of the best budget upgrades that have gone into the deck so far. A couple months ago, we did an episode on our Precon League. If you haven't watched it already, go check it out. It's a really fun format. We go over all the rules, and we give a little preview to the decks that we're playing. The deck that I chose to play is the Revival Trance Precon. This deck was from the Final Fantasy set, and it's led by Terra Herald of Hope with Celes Rune Knight as the alternate commander. Terra Herald of Hope is red, white, black for a 3/3 legendary creature, human, wizard, warrior, with the ability at the beginning of combat on your turn, mill 2 cards. Terra gains flying until end of turn. Whenever Terra deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2. When you do, return target creature card with power 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Celes Rune Knight, who is the alternate commander, has the cost 1 red, white, black for a 4/4 legendary creature, human, wizard, knight, with when Celes enters, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards plus 1. Whenever one or more other creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I chose the deck knowing that I would want to use Celes as the commander and build a combo strategy using her second ability. On top of that, this deck had quite a few really, really good staples right out of the box. The first one is Pitiless Plunderer, 3 and a black for a 1/4 creature human pirate. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a treasure token. The deck also has Stitch Together, which is black for a sorcery, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and has the ability Threshold, return that card from your graveyard to the battlefield instead if 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. The deck also has Ruinous Ultimatum, red, white, black for a sorcery, destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. The deck's got Rise of the Dark Realms, which is 7 black for a sorcery, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. And it's also got Reanimate, which is black for a sorcery, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. You lose life equal to its mana value. So starting here, there's very obviously a Reanimator theme to this deck straight out of the box. And from playing it, it definitely feels that way. The deck is super resilient and can get creatures out of the graveyard very, very easily. On top of all those really great staples, there are 27 new cards in the deck, at least from my count, and some of them turned out to be very, very playable. 5 of my favorite new cards from this deck were Summon Esper Valagarmonda, which is 3 and a red for an enchantment creature saga Drake with flying and haste. It's a 3/3 and has 4 different chapters. The first one is exile an instant or sorcery card from each graveyard. The other 3 chapters are all the same. Add red for each lore counter on this saga. You may cast an instant or sorcery card exiled with this saga, and mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. This card's really, really cool. It turns out that being able to cast one of your really key instants or sorceries again later in the game can be really powerful, and if nothing else, this is just a ritual. It's just going to generate mana for you, and it's pretty spectacular, honestly. It's overperformed. It's also just a 3/3 flying haste creature, which can deal a lot of damage and can kind of hit out of nowhere. I'm going to mention another creature later on that's also just a big flying creature. And with Celes, you can actually pump up your creatures pretty large. And so having an evasive creature to put +1/+1 counters on is pretty good. The next one is Mog Moogle Warrior. For 1 red and a white, you get a 1/2 legendary creature, Moogle Warrior with lifelink. It has the ability Dance. At the beginning of your end step, each player may discard a card. Each player who discarded a card this way draws a card. If a creature card was discarded this way, you create a 1/2 white Moogle creature token with lifelink. Then, if a non-creature card was discarded this way, you put a +1/+1 counter on each Moogle you control. This card just ends up making a lot of bodies, or at least making one really big lifelink body, and that actually matters in this deck. One thing that I've noticed from our Precon League is that having some solid lifelink creatures can really give you some staying power and help you push through into the late game. Since this is a combo deck and it is looking to end the game pretty quickly, it's important to be able to not get focused down immediately and kind of pad your life total with some lifelink creatures so that if you can't win early on, you can stick around long enough to try for a late game win. The next new card in the deck that I wanted to talk about was the Warring Triad. This is 3 mana for a 5/5 legendary artifact creature god with the abilities Flying, Trample, and Haste. As long as there are fewer than 8 cards in your graveyard, the Warring Triad isn't a creature, and it has the ability tap, mill a card, target player adds 1 mana of any color. So this is a this is a Millikin that adds colored mana, but also later in the game just becomes a 5/5 with Flying, Trample, and Haste. And because it has such a low mana cost, there are a lot of cards that can reanimate this card very easily in the late game. So there have been many games when I just play this early as a mana rock, and then other games where it becomes a real threat on the board when players' life totals are low, and all of a sudden I have a hasty, trampley creature. It's pretty awesome. I think this card can actually go in a lot of decks. Another new card is Espers to Magicite. For 3 and a black, it's an instant with exile each opponent's graveyard. When you do, choose up to 1 target creature card exiled this way. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's an artifact and it loses all other card types. This is a fun card to just steal a really, really good value piece out of an opponent's graveyard. I was able to pull off a pretty crazy win by using this to steal a Shiko to be able to then get one of the instants or sorceries out of my own graveyard that I needed to win the game. So I think there's a lot of utility for this card. I don't know that it's particularly good in a lot of decks, but it turns out that it's very fun to play, which I appreciate. And then the last card is Phoenix Down. 1 white mana for an artifact with the ability 1 white, tap, exile this artifact, choose 1. You either return target creature card with mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, or you exile target skeleton, spirit, or zombie. So I am playing in a Precon league, so I know the other decks that I'm up against. The second ability, the exile target skeleton, spirit, or zombie, really only works against one other deck. There is a spirits deck in our league. However, this just being a thing that I can put on the board on turn 1, and then it's just a 2 mana reanimate pretty much any creature out of my deck later in the game is pretty awesome. And I can do it at instant speed, which is great. Most of my combo pieces in this deck are all going to be mana value 4 or less, and they don't need to be untapped in order to perform the combo. So this turned out to be a very good card. Initially, it was on the chopping block. It was one of the cards I was going to take out of the deck. But as I played, it turned out that it really performed quite well with my deck in particular. I played the first 4 games of the league with Terra as the commander, and I was honestly super shocked by how resilient the deck is and how quickly it can rebuild. Terra is a very real engine that can generate a lot of value at any point during the game. I found that Terra was very good early in the game, very good in the mid game, and super good in the late game as well. So really, Terra is just an awesome commander. The deck seems super strong, and it won 50% of its league games with Terra as the commander. We're now in the 3rd week of the league with Celes as the commander, and so far, knock on wood, the deck has not lost a game. Let me explain how Celes's combos work. So the part of Celes that is relevant for these combos is actually her second ability. Whenever 1 or more other creatures you control enter, if 1 or more of them entered from a graveyard or was cast from a graveyard, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. In order to pull off this combo, you need 3 other things. You need a persist creature. Persist is when this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. Because Celes puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature when it enters from the graveyard, the creature just enters with no counters on it. You also need a sack outlet. So this could be something like Viscerous here, which is sacrifice a creature, scry 1. And then you need some sort of sacrifice payoff, like Blood Artist. Whenever this creature or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. The idea is that with Celes, which puts a +1/+1 counter on creatures when they enter from the graveyard, a persist creature, which enters the graveyard enters the battlefield from the graveyard with a -1/-1 counter on it, a sack outlet, and a sack payoff, you can infinitely sack this persist creature and get whatever the payoff is. In this case, it would have to be life drain in order to actually win the game. There are also a couple of 3-card combos that function with Celes. One of them is Celes plus Murderous Redcap, which is 2 and 2 hybrid Rakdos for a 2/2 creature goblin assassin. With whenever Murderous Redcap enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. It also has Persist and Saw in Half. 2 and a black for an instant, destroy target creature. If that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copies of that creature, except their base power is half that creature's power and their base toughness is half that creature's toughness. Round up each time. This combo line is actually a little bit convoluted, so let me try and walk you through it. You need to have Celes Rune Knight on the battlefield. You also need to have Murderous Redcap on the battlefield. You're going to play Saw in Half, targeting Murderous Redcap. Murderous Redcap will die, and you will create 2 token copies of Murderous Redcap. When the 2 token copies enter, they're going to put their ETBs on the stack. Their ETBs, just as a reminder, are when Murderous Redcap enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. You are also going to get the original Murderous Redcap re-entering because of its Persist trigger. You need to stack the triggers so that the 2 new copies of Murderous Redcap are underneath the new Persist instance of Murderous Redcap. When that one enters, you're going to have it deal damage equal to itself. That way, it's going to die, and its Persist trigger will trigger again, and it will come back to the battlefield. You're going to keep doing that. You're going to have your Murderous Redcap entering, dealing damage to itself, sending it to the graveyard, bringing it back with Celes because of the Persist trigger, and just doing that infinitely. What that's going to do is it's going to put a +1/+1 counter on the 2 new copies of Murderous Redcap that came from Saw in Half, and they're going to get infinitely large as many times as you have Murderous Redcap deal damage to itself. When all is said and done, you can allow the Murderous Redcap to deal damage to something else, and when you do, it's going to allow you to resolve the 2 ETB triggers from the new Murderous Redcaps from Saw in Half. That way you'll be able to point infinite damage at 2 of your opponents and take out 2 of them at the same time. So ideally, you're doing this after one of your opponents has already been eliminated, or it's easy enough to eliminate them with something else that you have. The other 3-card combo in the deck is Celes plus any Persist creature plus Goblin Bombardment, which is 1 and a red for an enchantment, sacrifice a creature, Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any target. The reason this is a 3-card combo is because Goblin Bombardment is both the sacrifice outlet and the sacrifice payoff. So with a Persist creature and Celes, you can infinitely sacrifice the Persist creature and just deal damage to your opponents. And that's an easy way to take them all out at pretty much the same time. The other thing that Celes has really got going for her is the amount of card advantage that she provides. By reanimating her or flickering her, you can dig really deep into your deck to find the combo pieces that you need to win. I've only gotten to play a few games with Celes so far, but I've already been able to draw through my entire deck with her wheel ability. So, these combos are great, but they are also very specific to Celes. The Persist creatures and the sacrifice cards really do very little for the rest of the deck. This made it really hard to know when to switch from Terra to Celes. Without all of the combo pieces, Celes was nowhere near as powerful of a commander as Terra. And without Celes, the combo pieces don't work and don't contribute to Terra's game plan. So there was really a balancing act in those first few weeks of upgrades to power up Terra while also preparing to switch over to Celes. I want to share with you a few of my favorite upgrades that have gone into the deck so far. The first one is Touch the Spirit Realm. 2 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target artifact or creature until Touch the Spirit Realm leaves the battlefield. It also has Channel for 1 and a white. Discard Touch the Spirit Realm. Exile target artifact or creature. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. We talked about this card on our last episode. It's such great interaction while also serving as protection. In this deck specifically, it has the added benefit of re-triggering Celes's ETB, allowing you to wheel and dig further into your deck. The next card is one of my favorite additions, and I'm actually not quite sure how good it is yet. It's Vincent Valentine, 2 black, for a 2/2 legendary creature human. Just assassin, not a human. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a number of +1/+1 counters on Vincent Valentine equal to that creature's power. Whenever Vincent attacks, you may transform it, and it transforms into Galleon Beast, which is a 3/2 legendary creature werewolf beast with trample and lifelink, and when it dies, you return it to the battlefield tapped. Honestly, one of the things that I felt like this deck needed was just another big threat. And Vincent Valentine can really be a big threat, especially when you follow it up with something like Ruinous Ultimatum, which I have gotten to do before. And like I said before, this deck actually synergizes really nicely with some life gain just because it keeps you in the game long enough, being a combo player that you can try and combo off late in the game if you need to. The next one that I wanted to talk about was Sevinne's Reclamation. This is 2 and a white for a sorcery. Return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy this spell and may choose a new target for the copy. It has flashback for 4 and a white. This is the kind of recursion that we need for our combo pieces, since a lot of them are stuck to creatures, as well as this deck can really get a lot of cards into the graveyard. So if we end up milling or wheeling or doing something that gets Sevinne's Reclamation into our graveyard, it allows us to get those other cards back out, even if it's not in our hand, which has proven to be very, very valuable. My next card is High Society Hunter. 3 black for a 5/3 vampire noble. It's got flying, and whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you draw a card. I actually just reading it this time. This is a card from Foundations, but this time when I'm reading it, I can kind of see some preliminary templating for Sephiroth. This card is cool because you get to draw a card anytime any non-token creature dies. Doesn't have to be yours. It works with your opponents as well. So this is the kind of card that, like I said, it can kind of be a big threat late in the game, especially because you can put +1/+1 counters on it with Celes, but it also just acts as a card draw engine, and it's really, really cheap. The next card, I think, is probably one of the most powerful cards in the deck. It's Lively Dirge. 1 and a black for a sorcery with Spree. For an additional 1 mana, you search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. For an additional 2 mana, return up to 2 target creatures with total mana value 4 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, for 5 total mana, you get to search your library for a card, put it into the graveyard, and then cheat out 4 mana value worth of creatures from your graveyard to the battlefield. Because this deck is a combo deck, and because a lot of those combos are on creatures, this is just 5 mana, put Murderous Redcap onto the battlefield, which is one of the key combo pieces for this deck. It also can get any combination of something like Putrid Goblin and Blood Artist, or Putrid Goblin and Umbral Caller Zealot, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. It turns out that this is just super, super efficient. So if you are playing the kind of deck that plays combos, especially creature combos, and you're wanting to run tutors, this is a really, really fun tutor. And it turns out that it's also just super flexible. If you need a utility piece, then this can get it. Even if you're just getting something like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, or a Stax piece, or something like that. Depending on what you're looking for and the kinds of games that your pod is playing, Lively Dirge actually does a lot for your deck. As I just mentioned, another card that I wanted to talk about is Umbral Caller Zealot. This is 1 and a black for a 3/2 human cleric with the ability Sacrifice another creature or artifact, Surveil 1. So this does a very good impression of Viscera Seer, but for 1 more mana. However, I think I like Surveil a lot better than Scry on a Viscera Seer effect. So Umbral Caller Zealot is probably going to be taking the place of Viscera Seer in a lot of my Sacrifice and Aristocrats decks. Just being able to get those cards into the bin when cards are a lot more useful in the graveyard than they are on the bottom of your library, especially in this deck where I have so much reanimation and so many ways to get things out of the graveyard. It just seems very, very valuable and is an awesome sacrifice outlet for this deck. One thing that I did not prioritize very early on in the Precon League was lands. But as I've had more room to make upgrades, I'm not as worried about getting some of those staples or some of those vegetables in. I have started to upgrade a few of the lands from the mana base, and I wanted to share a couple of them that if you're looking for budget upgrades for lands for your mana base, you might want to consider. The first one is Shattered Landscape. This is a land that taps to add colorless mana, but it also has tap, sacrifice this land, search your library for a basic mountain, plains, or swamp card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. And then it has cycling, in this case, red, white, black. But there is one of these lands for each of the three color combinations. This is the type of land that plays really, really well at a budget level because you want to be able to fix your mana with your mana base, but you also really, really want untapped lands. So this is both. If you don't care about the color of the land, this is an untapped land. It provides colorless mana, untapped the turn you play it. However, if you do need to fix the colors, then you can sacrifice the land to go get a basic of one of three colors. That seems really, really powerful in 3, 4, and 5 color decks. Probably less so in 4 and 5 color decks because you're almost always going to need the colored mana, would be my guess. But for a 3 color deck, this seems like a slam dunk. The other land that I put in recently is Conduit Pylons. It's a desert. When it enters the battlefield, you surveil one, it taps to add a colorless, or it filters. So for 1, you can tap it and add 1 mana of any color. Once again, I think surveilling in this deck is really, really good. And it doesn't enter tapped. It's just there are other colorless lands that came in the deck as part of the Precon that I'm taking out for this ability because, once again, it just does more, allowing me to surveil, and it filters if I really, really need the color. I do also want to give one honorable mention to Mardu Siegebreaker. It's 1 red, white, black for a 4/4 creature human warrior with death touch and haste. When it enters, exile up to 1 other target creature you control until this creature leaves the battlefield. Whenever this creature attacks, for each opponent, create a tap token that's a copy of the exiled card attacking that opponent. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice those tokens. The reason this is an honorable mention is because it is a Mardu card, so it really only goes in 3+ color decks, and you probably mostly only want to be playing it in 3 or 4 color decks would be my guess. But this card is insane in Celes. Being able to get 3 Celes triggers when this attacks, if you exiled Celes, is really, really awesome. And then when this dies, you get your other Celes back, and so you get another Celes trigger. So getting to wheel your hand selectively, might I add, that many times in a single turn is just so powerful, and it's just going to help you dig so deep into your deck. So Mardu Siegebreaker, even though it may not be super useful for your decks, it's amazing in Celes, and I would highly recommend it if you're playing Celes. So let me know if you try any of these cards in your decks, or if you have an idea for how you would upgrade Celes. You can check out my current Celes deck along with its $27 worth of upgrades at the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe, join our Discord, and until next time, remember to always pay the 1.